Good morning. So, sorry, everybody. I'm going to talk quickly about a new feature in 4D V14. As you know, I'm not much of a speaker, so please, if you could give me the poorest note, then nobody will ask me to do a session next year. That would be perfect for me, please. Because I hate doing that, but
it will not work.
Okay, and also I'm going to slightly change before I start. While I was talking with a few developers during the intersessions and in the morning and so on, I understood that some of you are using the replication, you know, the SQL replication, to actually do a kind of mirroring between two 4D databases. And I think it's a very bad idea, and I will quickly explain why before actually speaking about the new journaling system. The replication is table-based, so it does the good job of replicating everything that has changed between two tables. So if you deleted records, modified records, you will get all the updates, and it will work fine. But it is unsafe on a business rule logic. Just let me give you an example with two tables. You have, for example, invoices and line or orders and a line of order lines. And you want to synchronize two databases. So either you copy first the table of orders and then the line orders. By the time you've copied the table of orders, some new orders may have happened. You will not get them because when you synchronize, but you will get the new line orders. So you will have something which is out of sync. You may think it's no big deal because next time I'm going to sync, I will get the table, the order in the table order, everything will be fine. Yes, but if you crashed your main server and you want to go to the mirror server using that way, then you will get something that will not be that will not have the right referential integrity because you will have some line orders without the orders. And if you do the other way, if you try to synchronize first the line orders and then the orders, you'll get the same thing. So the problem with the table replication is that it is not safe on a transaction level. It doesn't keep the atomic logic you chose when dealing with your data. You chose to save an order with the line order in one atomic way, a transaction. It will not be preserved while doing that kind of replication. That's why I really don't recommend doing that for mirroring or to simulate mirroring. Yeah.
Would that be true if you were running at a time that no users were on?
No, it's not true if you're not. Of course, if you do it and you know that absolutely no data is going to be modified while you're doing it, it's safe, of course, yes.
Okay.
It's just that on a live server, it's kind of dangerous. Okay, now we worked on a new way to do the journal in 4D for several reasons I will explain. Before explaining all those reasons and the way it works, I want to very quickly give you, a lot of people ask me what is kept in the journal. They don't always know because it's binary, and if you don't look with an hexadecimal editor, it's not that easy to understand what's in the journal. So basically, it's very simple. So in the beginning of the journal, you have a header, a small header I will explain later. And then each operation is always stored the same way. You get a header so that we can ensure that it's actually an operation entry in the journal. Then you have the operation number, which is on 8 bytes, so it's a unique number that is incremented each time there is an operation. And then you have the length of the data. Then the type of operation, either it's a add record, modify record, delete record, and so on. And then the data itself, depending on what kind of operation you do. And then the length again. So the length is twice. And then a footer, a tag at the end of the operation. The reason why we have the length twice is that we can that way navigate in the journal forward and backward. So it helps a lot going from the end of the journal and trying to find the last operation. And it is sometimes useful. It is also useful in case of the new recovery I'm going to explain later. This, for those of you who already knew the internal for node, I can see somebody here, this hasn't changed much from what it used to be. What has changed is the type of operation we keep and the way we actually handle the operations. So I'll explain now. So there are six main changes. There are a lot of small changes, but 6 main changes in the way we operate with the journal. First, one big problem, one important thing is that now only the operations that actually modify the data increment the global operation counter. So, as you know, each time you enter something, you do an operation like add a record, modify a record, it would put that into the journal and increment a counter which is kept in your data file so that we could compare them and know what was the last operation that was performed in order to just perform the necessary operation in the journal. If you crashed and the data was flushed with operation 100, and in the journal it goes to 120, it will not replay from 1 to 100, it will just replay from 101 to 120. The problem with that, now only the operation that actually do something on the data increment that counter. So if you save a record, it will increment, but if you open the database, it will not increase that counter. And I will show you after that. Here is a brief summary, and then I will go into detail of why it's good and why it's better, actually. Instead of record number that are stored in the journal operation, we now keep primary keys. So when you add a record, you don't when you save a record, you don't have the record number, but the primary key as a reference to that record. I'll come back to that also later. Transactions are recorded in the journal only once. Oh, sorry, only once they are committed. We don't do the old way where they used to be recorded as soon as you started the transaction, and each transaction operation was saved immediately. And I'll also show you why it's better and so on. We modified a few things to allow navigation both ways. I will come to that. And we also have the ability to select which table are going to be recorded in the journal. And we allow to integrate the journal from another data file. So I'll now go into each point individually. So the reason why we did the ability to increment the global counter only on the right operation, on the one that actually modified the data, is to allow a better way of actually chaining mirroring, or at least that's one of the purpose. So basically the idea now is that you can have a main server that is started, you have a mirror, and that mirror can also have a mirror. So you can change that, and that mirror also can have a mirror. The reason why it could work that way is that we can now, when you open the journal, when 4D opens the journal and look at the operation it should rely on to know where to start and so on, opening a database, closing a database are not important anymore. They don't increment that counter. So they will not alter the synchronization level of your data with your journal. So that when you use that and copy it into another, into a mirror, that mirror itself can have its own journal, and even if the operation are not the same the old way, I mean, even if you open and close the database several times on the mirror, it doesn't matter because the operation counter will still be the same. So you can reuse that journal again and again on another mirror. Just here is actually a better explanation of what happens. The old way, you start from 1, you open the database, the counter would be 2. Then you close the database, it would be 3 and so on, 4. And then when you actually modify a record, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and you close the database, it is at 8. In the new way now, only it starts at 1, it stays at 1 until you actually modify the record, 2, 3, 4, and it stays at 4 when you close the database. So if you, for any reason, reopen the database, close the database on the mirror or on the main server, that counter will not be incremented. So you know that the journal only relies on the real operation that modified the data. You can reuse it without being out of synchronization, which was one of the main problems we had for mirroring actually with that. So now, one of the most important modifications, primary keys are used instead of record number. It makes it more robust, but I must tell you it will be a big pain for you. Sorry, it will be a big pain for you because that means that if you didn't have primary keys on your table, you have to find a primary key to have actually a real primary key on each table you want to record in the journal. We provide some tools for that. We have a component that is available in V13 to already start checking at your data and try to find the right primary key for you. The algorithm is based on the idea that if you have a unique value, a unique field, only one, then that one may be a good candidate for a primary key. Or also, if you have a field which is the destination of many relations, n-to-1 relations, then it must be also a good candidate for a primary key. So we will show you for each table a list of candidates with the most reasonable one on top, and you can select. Or you can also choose to, with that tool, to generate a new field which will be a primary key with an auto-increment value or auto-generated UUID. It's, in both cases, it helps a lot. If you choose to have an auto-incremented value, we did it in a way that would help migrate a lot of different data files with the same database structure. So you work in your office as a developer, you know that you need to modify your structure, and you decide that on that table you need a primary key that will be a long integer auto-incremented. Okay? You do that. Now you give that structure to your customer. It will automatically recreate the missing value using the auto-incremented field on the customer's data table, and so in that case it will work the way you intended to do without any further modifications. Also, we now check when opening the database the first time that each primary key is actually a primary key. That means we check if there are no null values, which may happen if you created the field later and you forgot to fill some values, so they may be null. Even if null are not a default value in fourth dimension, there may be null values. And also we check if there are duplicated values. So that happens the first time you convert a database from 13 to 14 or from 12 or 11 to 14. We check at all the primary keys and see if they are real primary keys. So now, why does it make it more robust? Here is the old way. You would create a record. Okay, so you create a new record with some value A, B, and C, and it's record number 10. Then another one, D, E, F for record 11, and so on. And then you modify record number 10 to put A2, B2, C2 instead of A, B, C, and so on, record 11. Let's say that in that mechanism, if one of the entries is missing, let's say entry number 1 here is missing. If you try to replay that, it will replay by creating record whose value are D, E, and F as record number 10 instead of record 11, because entry 1 is missing, so it didn't create record number 10. So now everything that was relying on that record number 10 being A, B, C will now work with D, E, and F. So when later on you have operation number 4 that is played and that says modify record number 10, it will actually modify what is now the record number 10, what used to be in your database record number 11. So it will put A2, B2, C2 in place of D, E, F, and not what you wanted. You wanted to replace A, B, and C. And it will do the same thing for record 12. That will now be record 11. So the modified record 11 will actually modify your record 12. So that's the reason why right now if any entry is missing in the log file becomes invalid and we don't play it. We stop playing. What I mean playing the log file, I mean integrating. Sorry, that's my internal method name. But so the integration stops as soon as there is an invalid entry. So that means there's no easy way to recover what's being, because, okay, your database may be damaged for some reason, either a bug in 4D that still happens, or for some physical reason, the hard disk is damaged, or when you copied over FTP for some reason, some blocks were damaged. But the journal file itself may be damaged also for many reasons. And you store the journal file on a separate disk, but it may have a bad blocks, it may have a lot of reasons why it's damaged. And if you rely on it to recover things, there may be times where you cannot use it. It happened, and it's really a big problem because everything is out of synchronization and so on. So with primary keys now, we don't store the record number while saving the modifying or creating a record operation, but we store the primary key. So we create a record ABC with primary key X, and another one primary Y, and so on. When we modified the record, we modified finding that record with the primary key value, X. So let's say, same scenario, in that case, the entry number 1 is missing. No problem. It will not create the record ABC with primary key X. This one will not be created because the entry is missing in your log file. But it will create D, E, and F. It will create GHI with primary key Z. And then you want to modify record with primary keys X. It will not find that. If you're not in recovery mode, it will stop and says something is wrong, your journal is damaged. But now we will provide also a recovery mode, which will say, okay, there's something wrong, but you can try to recover as much as possible. Would you like to continue? And then it will recreate the record with a primary key X because it's not there, so it can create it, no problem. It will be at a different record number, but the record number here doesn't matter. And then it will modify record with primary keys Y because it will find it and so on. So it will still integrate as much as possible, sometimes without even any problem in your final result, sometimes with missing stuff, because if you never add a modified record X, then that X will not be there. But at least you will get everything else. So that's why it's only available in a recovery mode, because it is not safe. I mean, you may have missing data, but at least everything else will be there, and you will not lose more than the missing part of the journal. So it's much more robust and so on. It will be part of the new recover. And also, sorry, there is, so it allows partial recover in case of journal is damaged. It allows a bit more, but I will come on that later, the reason why we chose primary keys, so I will, sorry, animations, okay. Okay, transactions which are recorded in the journal only once they are committed. That also is important. So right now you have a journal file that is okay, already 10 megabyte big. You start a transaction, so the beginning of the transaction is recorded, and you want to send that file for a mirroring to the mirror. So you need to close that journal file and start a new one. So everything that is already started, all the transactions that have already been started have to be copied over in memory. The new journal file is started, and they will be put back into that new journal file. Okay, it's fine, but what if you don't want to do that now? You want to use the new mechanism that I didn't talk about yet, but there is a new mechanism where you can actually send portion of the journal without closing the journal. So this will be part of the new the new mirroring mechanism that we will supply during the year in 2014. So you have the ability to choose, okay, I want just some part, and usually the part you want is the last part of the journal, since you already asked. So you will have new command in 4D to say, okay, give me all the changes since that operation. And you will get only that. If the transactions were stored as soon as they were started, you would get all those beginning of transaction without the end of those transactions, because they would not be committed yet. So you would get something not complete, and when trying to integrate it or replay it on the mirror, you would get started transaction without the commit or cancel. So it's not good. That's why we now only store the transaction at once in an atomic way once they are committed. That means that you never have cancel transaction in your journal anymore also. So if you start a big transaction, several levels deep and so on, and cancel it, nothing will be stored in the journal anymore. And once you commit, while it is committed, there's no way to actually, there is an atomic lock internally so that nobody else can actually write to that journal at the same time, and nobody else can actually read from that journal while the transaction is being written. So you know that they are in one big atomic chunk in the journal. So the two main things here are so allowing mirroring in small increment, and it keeps the journal from unnecessary growth if you have a lot of transactions that are cancelled and that were stored for nothing. As I mentioned, we can navigate both ways in the journal file. So that allows star mirroring, but I don't know if that's the right word. To mirror in to have one main server being mirrored by several other computers. This is not the only reason why we can do star mirroring. The fact also that we only store transactions once they are committed, or that we use primary key helps. But you will have the ability to start a server and have one or two or three other computers connected to that main server and being mirrored to it. And the reason it works that way is that each mirror can ask for different parts of the journal at the same time. And because the main server can navigate into the journal both ways, it can give that, sorry, that I'm going to. It can return that information very quickly to each mirror individually. So you can have a mirror that asks for a chunk of the journal every hour, another one that asks for a chunk of the mirror every 5 minutes, and it will work because the main server will keep track of each position individually and will return an information to each mirror in a separate way. So that helps, and that makes it more safer actually to handle. Ability to choose which table will be recorded in the journal. It is much faster on temporary table. If you have tables that you use for a lot of data manipulation, but you don't actually want to keep, you don't care about that data and so on, it's used for temporary manipulation, it happens a lot, then it's stupid to keep that into the journal and make the journal grow for nothing, and it's also much faster because you don't need to record that into the journal for each operation. Sorry, I'm almost done. We'll have a long time for question and answer. Yeah, as I said, it's a quick explanation, but okay. Yeah, the ability to integrate the journal from another data file that comes from another data file. That's actually a way to make mirroring, manual mirroring, easier. What I mean by manual mirroring is a mirror that you can do by yourself, where as a developer you control the stuff. There will be an automatic mirroring in the future release of 4D, but during the year. But here, at least you can do it that way. You can, by any means, copy the mirror to another database, even if that database was not a copy of the original data. You know, even if you started a new data file, or if you, for any reason, let's say you have a main database, a mirror. You don't want to stop the main one, it's working and so on, but on the mirror you suspect that something is wrong. So you recover on the mirror, you do a repair, for example. When you do a repair, it actually creates a new data file. And then you can still integrate the log file from the main into the mirror that was repaired, even if it has a different internal ID. So it's optional. By default, it will still work the old way, but you have optional parameters when you ask the integration of a journal to say, I don't care for the matching between the data ID and the journal ID. So it's quite useful. It also allows you to, for example, to never do a backup of your main server. If you want, you can have the main server running and never do a backup. You run, you integrate each time the journal into the mirror, and you do a backup of the mirror. And if anything wrong happens with the main, you trash it, take the copy of the mirror, put it back again, and rework. And the journal can be started without taking care of the difference between the ID, because it's a backup that will work and so on. So you have a way to make the main server less. I mean, doing a backup on the main server sometimes slows down things, because first everything is locked. You cannot write to that server while it's being backed up. So that way you can work without any interruption on the main server. That's it. Sorry. So yeah. Question. Record deletions.
With the primary key instead of the record number, so we can know which record will be.
I didn't hear that one.
Explain the way we can now know which record has been deleted from the log file, which was not possible with the previous log file. Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, because in the journal now we keep the record number, we also do that when deleting a record. So when you delete a record, you know which one has been deleted, because it's the primary key, which is much easier than with the record number, because when you were deleting a record and it had only the record number and nothing else, and you would create a new record, it would take that number, so there was no way to know which record was deleted, because you could not read it again.
In the old mirroring, we have mirror only, read only. So in the new mirroring, can we have the mirror which is read and write only?
Yeah.
Read and write, sorry.
You can do that, of course, yes. But that's a good question, because there may be a lot of implications for that. The mirror, you can write to the mirror, because it's based on primary keys. It doesn't seem to matter, but it could, depending on your business rules, in the referential rules of your data. In the mirror, let's say you modify a record with that primary key, then you integrate it as the same primary key, then of course it will reintegrate. But that means you will lose the modification you made on your mirror. So if you don't care for that modification, it's all right, but if you care for that modification, it may not be a good idea. On the other hand, because you can choose also which table are going to be recorded, you may decide that on the mirror, you will not record some of the table. So you may have something like a main server with table A, B, and C being recorded. And on the mirror, only A and B are recorded, but not C. You don't want. So it will still integrate the modification from the main server whose table A, B, and C are modified. And C will be there, but it will not be in the new log file of the mirror. So that way, it could be useful if one of the table is only used for some kind of information that don't need to be in the final result, for example. But yes, the mirror can be in write, and you can modify things in the mirror. Yeah. Okay,
and is it now compatible with the single user 4D version as well? Or we still have to have 4D server for mirroring?
No, you can do a mirror with a single user version of 4D, because the journal, you can copy the journal, especially now that you don't need to actually keep track of the ID, sorry, the database ID with the journal ID. That way you can have two single user version of 4D running the same database structure but on different data files.
Right.
And you can use the journal from one on the other one to integrate.
Because in the previous version of 4D, integrate log file command was ignored on single user.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know that we ignore. Sorry.
Okay.
So there may be.
Yeah, yes, indeed. The mirroring functionality. The mirroring functionality has been reserved to 47.
So it will be still reserved to 40 servers. So I didn't know that there was a commercial limitation. Sorry. I could, but you know, we have a deal. I work on the technical thing, they work on the sales part, and I don't mess with them, and they don't mess with me.
Okay, so my understanding of how journals work is that if you change a record, the journal gets written first, and the record gets written to cache second. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then finally, when cache is purged, it moves out. My assumption is when you're in a transaction, exactly the same thing is going to happen, right? So if you have a transaction that you've changed a record and 20 children, let's say. So that inside that transaction, you're going to then commit the one record, and when you commit it, that record will be written to the journal, and then put into cache, and etc. all the way down. Is that still going to be correct?
No. Now, what's going to happen is that the transaction is in memory or maybe on a temporary file, but then you commit. Then, once you commit, all entries of the transaction, all the modification will be first stored into the journal, and then the transaction data is actually going to be returned to cache.
All.
Yeah.
Okay. So the new rule has to be keep your transactions small, because if you don't and you're tying up, if you have this really, really large transaction that you're doing, you could lock out other users for however long it takes to commit that transaction.
Yes and no. Here's exactly what's going to happen. If you have several people trying to commit a transaction at the same time, then they will still be able to write to the journal in an interlaced way. It doesn't matter, because what is important is for one particular process to be sure that your transaction is first written to the journal before it is actually be written to cache. But if you have several processes doing the same thing, then they will each write some entries to the journal, okay, together, and then after that they will write to cache. So it will not lock everything. So let's say you have one big transaction, okay, and you have a lot of small transactions, or even no transaction at all in some of the process. Then it's all right. They will be written to the journal in the middle of your transaction, but that that doesn't mean that your transaction will be written to the log file partially before being written to cache. No, it will still wait until it has written all its entries into the journal and then will be written to the cache.
So it's that transaction because...
Yeah, only that transaction.
What I understood you to say was not that. So,
oh,
okay.
Sorry, I did.
Currently, if you're modifying a record and there's a blob in the record that is stored as outside of the record, that blob is not recorded in the journal if there's no change. Is there a change to that?
So, for blob outside the record, several changes. Either it's outside of the record but still in the data file, or it's outside of the record and in an external document. And then two different subcases. Either it's handled by 4D or it's a completely external pass which does not belong to the 4D external data pass. So let's do each step individually. When it's stored into the data file but outside of the record, the blob itself now will have a reference to the primary key of the record it belongs to and the field number of the record it belongs to. It will be stored inside the log file. And that blob will only be stored if it has been modified or if it's new. So if you modify a record and don't touch the blob, it's not in the journal, which is what you want because it's more efficient, especially if you have a lot of large blobs and you just modify a few things in your data you don't want. That's the idea of blobs when they're external. So that works that way. Now there is a reference. If it's in an external pass, so outside of the data file, then either it belongs to 4D, so inside the external data folder, inside your data folder. So if the blob hasn't changed, nothing happens, of course, but if it has changed, then instead of the record ID and so on, what will be stored will be the pass of that blob, so that when restoring, it will find that pass the same way. And the pass plus, of course, the data of the blob that will be stored inside the journal. So when you integrate the log, it will recreate exactly the same pass in your new data folder and with the same data. If it is outside of 4D, if it doesn't belong to 4D, it's a picture in a separate disk because you want, then nothing happens. It will not be stored in the journal. What will be stored, of course, is that inside the record, the field will still have the right path to that picture, so that when you integrate the log back, it will reference to the same picture that was stored in an external disk. There.
Since you said the mirror can be written to, and the mirror can have its own journal also, can you integrate that journal back to the primary?
You could, but it would really be a bad idea. It would be a real bad idea. No, of course, there may be some occasion. As a general way, I would say no. In some particular occasion, I could say yes. Depending on what modification you do in the data. But keep in mind, it's not supposed to be handled as a two-way synchronization, okay? It's not done for that. People are, I knew that question would arise. We bet on it. I won. And, no, it's really not done for two-way synchronization. There may be a reason why you may want to modify some record on and put them back and integrate that, but usually, as a general matter of speaking, no, you should not do that. Sorry.
Yes, so all of these changes now, are they inherently in 14.0 or is this a work in progress on some of them?
No. So the changes of the journal and everything I described here is in 14.0. What is not yet are the new commands to actually manipulate the partial chunks of the journal and to integrate and do the recovery based on a damaged journal. That will be in year 2014.
You talked about primary keys on the records.
Oh.
Is this the primary key that we're putting into the tables, or is this something that's being kept by 4D?
No, it's your choice of a primary key. So you choose which field or fields is or are going to be a primary key, and they're yours to control. So it could be automated by the fact that you could choose a long integer, auto-incremented number, or auto-generated UUID. Or it could be a string that you create yourself, or a number that you create yourself. So yeah, it's your choice. As long as it has to be unique and non-null. That's it.
Would we have the ability to skip certain operations in the log and then continue recovery from different spots?
Exactly. That's the idea also. That was part of. Yeah, you will have the ability to do some partial integration. Keep in mind that it could be dangerous because you may be missing some information. But yes, it makes it.
Go, skip, continue.
Exactly. That's the idea.
You mentioned that, if I understood you correctly, that if we have a table that does not currently have a unique ID, that if we then add the ID to it and say auto check, that we don't need to go through the records and assign an ID for existing records.
Exactly.
4D will do that itself. Is that on conversion, or just when it opens up the data file and says, oh, this is a new field, I need to populate all my records? So we don't do that manually and step through all the records and generate an ID for them.
That's exactly the ID, yes. You don't have to do it manually. Once you've chosen a new field to be auto-generated and to be a primary key, then it will automatically do it on every new data, or when you open a data the first time with that structure that didn't have that field, it will recreate it.
Is that process like a super low-level process that will not run our database triggers, or will our database trigger run on that update?
It should not. That's a good question. I don't remember, but I'll check. But I think it is not based on the database trigger. I don't think it will run the database trigger, but I have to check. I'm not sure. I'll have to check.
3 small questions. First, this primary key, is this the same method to select this as the primary key that is used for replication? Or the SQL primary key that can be checked in the...
Yeah, it's the same kind of... Yeah, exactly. Once you created a primary key in SQL, it's the same primary key, yes.
Then second question, this goes to point 6. This was about integrating journal from another data file, so if it does not match the backup. Is this available in the MSC as well, so that we can integrate?
Yeah, that will be also part of the MSC. And actually, when it will be in the MSC, you will have a further option to actually be in a recovery mode, as I mentioned. So it can even try to recover when there are some damage entry in the journal, or even some entry which may not be valid anymore in your data. So yes, that will be part of the MSC.
And the last question, because the transactions that are started but not committed are no longer visible in the journal, is there another way to troubleshoot problems if there is an application that behaves strange. So are there external files written for the transaction that we can check, or what would be the best way to solve such problems?
Yeah, that was one of the small drawback of that, is that, yeah, you're right. Now there's no way, if a transaction was not committed for some reason, that may be a valid reason, but that may also be a mistake somewhere in the program, or some external problem. There's no way to know. And I'll be thinking, right now there's no easy way to know that. We may consider doing a kind of separate log that would not be a journal, but that would be more a kind of debug log or so on, to keep track of all operation, including the cancelled one, so that you would have an idea of what happened and why it happened. But right now, no,
The primary key that's used to determine the unique record, does the unique checkbox have to be checked on that field, or can you trust me that my value there is unique?
No, actually, I don't trust you, but no, sorry, no. What I mean, I don't trust you. I don't trust a 4D developer by essence, but no. Basically, when you choose primary key, it will always be internally considered as unique. Even if you don't check unique, it will still check for uniqueness. So it behaves as if it was unique.
Any other question?
So okay. That was quick. We ended up earlier. If you have questions about other things, you can.
No, you're on time.
It's about time.
Yeah, we have 20 minutes in advance.
Oh yeah, we have. So.
So please remind to fill in the survey, or to evaluate the session online as you like.
Not. Okay.
I will get the paper at the door. Thank you, Laurent.
Oh. What?